burden. Okay, that's the objective. Every generation before us, every generation is getting more and more toxic, right? So again, it's not even a question of whether you're toxic or not, it's how toxic are you. So it's a critical part of healing, right? Most of the degenerative diseases that we see today, in part, is due to a toxic burden. Okay, so so let's just talk about it. So number one is there's a kind of a funny thing I always think about when I talk about detoxification. It goes back to the movie Jerry Maguire. Yeah, you remember the movie Jerry Maguire, right? When the little kid in there, what was his name? I think his name was Jonathan Lipnicki. Lipnicki, I think his name was. Anyway, but it was like, hey Jerry, did you know that a human has the head? What was it? A human head weighs 8 pounds. Right, that's my famous line. It actually weighs maybe more like 11 or 12 pounds, actually. But it's like, hey, Jerry, did you know that your liver does over 500 metabolic processes? Yeah, your liver kind of sits under the right rib cage here a little bit. Your liver is a very large organ, right? And it's often said, can you live without your liver? And the answer is absolutely not, right? You have two kidneys, you can live without one kidney. You have two lungs, you could literally live without a lung, right? But you cannot live without your liver. You can live, ironically, you can live with 50% of your liver. Okay, maybe not well, but you can live with 50% of your liver. The kind of cool thing about the liver, though, it actually regenerates. Yeah, it actually will grow back, which is good. So if you take care of your liver, right, if you take care of it, if you lower the toxic burdens, right, and ideally feed it with some good nutrients and stuff, right, is that your liver has the opportunity to grow back and function properly. So people asking, how do you begin to analyze some of these things, right? So yeah, on a like for example, on just on a routine blood test, okay, routine blood test, right, you'll see some markers, right, and what is called a chem profile or chemistry profile. And there are two markers there. One is the main one is called, the letters are ALT, right? And that represents a liver enzyme, or the liver enzymes, right? And you want to see those in a normal range. So if those enzyme numbers are going up on a blood test, that means that there is inflammation in the liver, and your liver is basically more cells are dying than are being replaced on a daily basis, right? So that's a marker of an inflamed liver. Right, so if you see that, for example, you probably would hold off from doing the amalgam removals, right, until you start normalizing these things. Right, that's a key part, that your liver is not capable of really handling a toxic burden. Okay. Um, Another marker that is typical on a blood test, right? We look at cholesterol, but under cholesterol, you're going to see triglycerides, right, which is fat in your blood. It's normal to be there, but if it's elevated, excuse me, that would mean that there's too much fat in your blood. And so if we see high triglycerides along with high liver enzymes, that is clinically going to be a fatty liver, right? And it doesn't have to be alcohol induced, right? One of the main drivers behind the elevation of triglycerides is blood sugar, okay? Insulin resistance. So insulin resistance, is a main cause of a fatty liver. So if you start thinking about things again from a root cause solution, and if we're trying to lower our toxic burdens and support our clearing processes and balance our hormones and so forth, right? Blood sugar management is a critical part of this. Okay. Um, so, good. Oh yeah, so yeah, there was a question about fibromyalgia yeah, it's a good example here. Okay, so fibromyalgia, which is a pretty, I mean, devastating condition to have. A person who has fibromyalgia is living in constant chronic pain. The pain typically goes all over the body, right? But it's just, I mean, people's life is really just completely disrupted with fibromyalgia. And it is interesting, right? Is this on, by the way? Because I see this is not here. I'm just making sure. This audio button. Okay, okay, make sure that was running. So fibromyalgia it affects more women than it does affect men, which is an interesting thing to think about. And why is that? So, clinically, I say medically, right? What do? We medical people prescribe medications. They prescribe pain medications. Okay. And so just to try to get by. But an interesting observation about fibromyalgia is that when a person has excess estrogen, or they're estrogen dominant, right? The hormone estrogen has an affinity to bind to the nerve endings of pain nerves. So there is a strong correlation to estrogen dominance as a causative feature of fibromyalgia.